Good afternoon from Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. I'm right behind the historic Washington Memorial Chapel. So today I want to talk about why people like me are leaving well-paying corporate jobs and moving abroad. In my case, I'm moving to Kerala to enjoy the slow life of Kerala. So first to begin with, I want to talk about the typical American work week. We supposedly work 40 hours, which is not the case all the time. Most of us on IT, we work late hours. We work on weekends to do production deployments. We wake up early to work with offshore teams in Philippines and India and so on. So the actual work hour is significantly more than the 40 hours. Okay, but then if you look at it from the finance perspective, I would say at least 2 days of the week goes towards taxes, federal taxes, state taxes, city tax, local tax, and property tax, and so on. Easily 2 days of the week, you are basically working to pay the taxes. One day of the week, you are basically working to pay your mortgage or rent and your condo insurance and so on. At least, and another day, day and a half for all the other insurances like your health insurance and your life insurance and car insurance and so on. Okay, so if you really look at it, only like half the day in a week, in a work week, you are actually spending on yourself, maybe saving some money, trying to save some money for retirement, save some money for your upcoming vacation, all kinds of other things. So basically, out of the 5 days that you're working, most of it goes towards other things that support your work, that support your current situation, and not necessarily in a positive way that benefits you as an individual or your family. Okay, so that is the first point. The second one, I would say, is the how fast time flies in the US, because our weeks and weekends are packed with activities, work, children's activity, and so on. Lives moves very fast, and so I came here in the early 90s. I spent almost 35 years in this country, and I cannot believe how fast time flew. I was just a young kid when I first arrived here, and it's unbelievable. You start to go to work on a Monday morning, and before you know it, it's Friday evening. You are gassed, you are exhausted. Then on Saturday, you have take your kids out for all your kids activities, whether it's baseball or a cricket or soccer or whatever, and there is very little time left for relaxing, really socializing with your friends, exercising, and all other activities that are very important in life. So this bothers me a lot. I've noticed that whenever I'm in India, even though I've not spent a huge amount of time in India after I came to the US, I've noticed that it is a slightly slower pace of life. I've also noticed that in India you can do a lot of mixing of work life with other aspects of life. For example, it's very common in Kerala, for example, for people to like attend a marriage in the morning and 3 hours later show up for work, and so there is a lot of mixing that is going on that is not happening a lot in the US, particularly because of the distances involved and company policies and things like that. Okay, so that's a second point. The third one is something I was reading about recently, and I've also noticed it a lot during my career, is boredom. Work is very interesting at the beginning phase of your career. Let's say whether you're young, you just graduated from college and you're working. Yeah, it is very interesting, and it's also motivating because you are trying to move into your first apartment by yourself without any roommates, you are trying to save money to buy a house, your first car, and things like that. So there is a lot of motivating factors. So you ignore all the negative aspects of work and you continue working hard. But let's say all your basic needs are met, and let's say that happens in like 10 years or 15 years. Then if you closely pay attention, you will notice that it has become very boring. And some people switch jobs to get the excitement back, but that might last for a few months. So a lot of studies have been done, and a lot of Americans respond by saying that one of the biggest issues they have at work is the boredom. It's the same meeting. I would say for the last 7 or 8 years, I used to work for a very, very high profile technology company, and I would spend at least 35 hours per week in meetings. Most of these meetings are follow ups of other meetings. And a lot of times when I'm in a meeting, I get called into another meeting. So it's not very productive. As a technical person, I want to do things that are fun for me, enjoyable for me, but then you have to do a lot of process-oriented stuff, lot of documentation, lot of managerial things that are quite boring, and after a while all the projects begin to look the same. It's the same people with different roles and things like that. And after a while, work gets very boring. So that's one thing that is very problematic for me. So, one thing, sometimes I feel like, okay, I have to like ignore all the boredom and focus on the money, the paycheck that comes every 2 weeks. But increasingly, it is difficult to do that. It's difficult to do that for years and years and decades together. So the final point I want to make is the financial reality. I just mentioned in my first point that 4 or 4.5 out of the 5 days you are basically working for somebody else. You know, but if you compare this to Kochi, Kerala, it's very different. I've done the math very well. I know all my expenses, potential expenses that are going to come up pretty soon. And you can live very comfortably in Kochi for $1,000 a month. And that is unbelievable compared to the expenditures that most of us have here in the US. So this $1,000, I've mentioned it a few times in my past videos. I do have an apartment in Kochi already. It's paid for. I don't have a mortgage. I'm not going to have a rental payment. So $1,000 without the mortgage and without the rent is a very good amount in a city like Kochi. And Kochi is not Timbuktu. It's the most important city of that state, even though it's not the state capital. It is extremely well connected to the rest of the world. It has like almost 25 flights per week to the Middle East. So as you know, if you can fly to Dubai from Kochi, you can pretty much fly to any country in the world using Emirates and airlines similar to that, like for example, Qatar and Etihad. So it's a very well connected city. Anything that you can get in Philadelphia, which is where I live, you can get that in Kochi. I'm not saying Kochi and Philadelphia are the same. There is a part of Philadelphia called Center City, which is where I live. It's a fantastic neighborhood. It has many sub-neighborhoods like Rittenhouse Square, Old City, Washington Square, and a little bit of Chinatown. And this is a spectacular neighborhood. There is nothing like that in India, for that matter. I'll be honest about that. But overall, if you take Philadelphia has a lot of bad neighborhoods. So if you take the big picture of Philadelphia versus the big picture of Kochi, I think you can compare these two cities. They are pretty good. Philadelphia is and will always remain my favorite city in the world. It's my hometown. But unfortunately, I cannot continue living here because of all the things that I mentioned and the cost of living and so on. So I do wanted to mention all this as some of the key reasons why I'm leaving a high-paying job and picking the slow life of Kochi, Kerala. So please Let me know your thoughts. I will try to respond to each of them, each of your comments. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye.